With the video game world abuzz about the upcoming release of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I thought it was a great time to introduce to you the history of one of my favorite Final Fantasy titles and probably the one I've spent the most time in hours-wise. So in this edition of Hibiki History, we're going to take a look at a game released in 2006 for the PS2 by Square. This is Final Fantasy XII. Final Fantasy XII is probably best known for introducing several innovations to the series, including a seamless battle system, an actual controllable camera, a customizable gambit system which lets you automatically control the actions of your characters, and a license system that determines which abilities and equipment are used by certain characters. Now, while the game featured a plethora of new innovations, it also had classic favorites such as Chocobos and Moogles, and the ability to summon monsters also makes a return in Final Fantasy XII. The changes made for this game at the time were much needed and greatly appreciated in my opinion. Final Fantasy XII earned numerous Game of the Year awards in various categories from noted video game publications. It also sold more than 2 million copies in Japan and became the fourth best-selling PS2 game of 2006 worldwide, and as of March 2007, over 5.2 million copies of the game have been shipped worldwide. Initial development for Final Fantasy XII began in December 2000 and was headed by Final Fantasy Tactics director Yasume Matsuno and Final Fantasy XI director Hiroyuki Ito. Matsuno actually provided the original concept and plot of the game but was forced to bow out of his roles midway through production due to health concerns. As a result of his health issues, the team was reformed as a consequence. The new directional duo consisted of Ito and Hiroshi Menagawa, while Akitoshi Kawazu became the game's executive producer. Series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi was disappointed by Matsuno's departure and declined to play the game beyond its introduction. The desire to move away from random encounters was present since the beginning of development. This desire fueled the development of the active dimension battle system so players could seamlessly move from battle to exploration. The gambit system was conceived early on as a way to facilitate this change. Battle system designer Hiroshi Tomotatsu states that it gradually moved away from a complex and rigid formula to the more flexid formula seen in the final version of the game. It's rumored that he drew inspiration for the gambits from actual plays in American football where each team member has a job to do based on the conditions and desired outcome. As for the license system, he explained that needing licenses to perform certain actions was a natural extension of the rigid structured society of Arcadia. As with most games, in early stages of development, Menagawa revealed that numerous ideas and features that were planned for the game were dropped from the final stages due to certain constraints and hardware limitations. Some of these included the ability for a player to join in on the gameplay, enabling a two-player mode. Another idea they were tossing around was having a considerable amount of thought was the ability to recruit non-playable characters to rejoin in the mob hunts. Due to technical limitations, however, and multiple number of characters joining the fray, the development phase took longer than expected, causing delays and not meeting the release date. Design inspiration of the world in Final Fantasy XII came from a mix of medieval Mediterranean countries and also a hybrid mixture of Egyptian culture. Art director Hideo Manaba came under great criticism from fans at the time that said he blatantly ripped off certain worlds in Star Wars for the art concept. It was not necessarily an influence to the game's designs, he would later say in an interview. Now, like the development team's previous game they had worked on, Vagrant Story, which featured a strong man in his prime quote-unquote as the protagonist, had been unsuccessful and unpopular. The change regarding Final Fantasy XII from a big and tough protagonist to a younger, youthful one was thus decided after targeting demographics were considered. The graphics and cutscenes at the time were absolutely gorgeous and received critical acclaim. Hitoshi Sakimoto composed and arranged most of the game's soundtrack, with Hayato Matsuo and Masahiro Iwata creating 7 and 2 tracks respectively. As of July 2008, Final Fantasy XII has held the record for the longest development ever in a video game, spanning 5 years. Final Fantasy XII sold more than 1,700,064 copies in its first week in Japan alone, almost equaling the sales of Final Fantasy X in its first week. A Square Enix conference report stated that Final Fantasy XII sold more than 2.38 million copies in Japan in the 2 weeks since its March 16, 2006 release. In North America, Final Fantasy XII shipped approximately 1.5 million copies in its first week. As of March 2007, the game has shipped over 5.2 million copies worldwide, and it was also the 4th best-selling PlayStation 2 game of 2006 worldwide. Without a doubt, the most praise of any of the Final Fantasy series always goes to Final Fantasy VII. You could say that Final Fantasy VI gets just as much love, but for me, Final Fantasy XII consumed my entire life at the time. This game is always overlooked in the series and an excellent addition and an excellent way to enter the Final Fantasy series if you've never played one of these games.